Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy that I can again welcome Frans Timmermans in Prague to our Prague European Summit. With Frans, we have here someone who is not only the Vice President of the European Commission, but also someone who is deeply concerned about what is going on in Europe and who makes significant political and intellectual effort to overcome the challenges we are facing. For example, his recent book on brotherhood provides a remarkable contribution to the reflection of our European condition. Several times I had opportunity to discuss with Frans about what is good and what is wrong in Europe. We agreed on many things and maybe we can also discuss many things. However, at least for me, these have always been fruitful intellectual exchanges that help me progress on understanding where we are and what we need to do. To contribute to our reflection on Europe today, I would like to briefly touch upon three recent crises that have been significantly affecting European politics. The debt crisis in the Eurozone, the migration crisis, and the crisis of European social democracy. At the first glance, these three crises do not seem to have much in common. They are about different issues and about different actors. Their dynamics are different and their effects are different. Having said that, I believe that despite all of these differences, they also have quite a lot in common. I even argue that their darkest consequences can be brought to a single common denominator. The common denominator of the European social question, which has been neglected and ignored for too long a time. I am not going to review all the elements of each of the crises. I would rather like to show that each is linked with social question and none can be properly tackled without addressing the social question. To start with, as a consequence of the financial crisis in the Eurozone and of the policy responses to it, some countries accumulated huge debts whose repayment is likely to stifle prosperity of debtor countries for many years to come. Eurozone, which all used to see as a community of prosperity, turned into stifling straitjacket for some of its members. Unfortunately, those who suffer most are the most vulnerable people in respective societies. Pensioners, single mothers, young people, people who depend on public services. As a result, many of those who originally looked up to Europe were let down and lost any belief in social justice in Europe. Czechia is not a member of the Eurozone, but we do not want to stay out of it forever. However, the Eurozone we want to join is the one which will help us converge with the richer, including the improvement of lives of the most deprived, and not the one which may keep us down. Secondly, most of the problems of the migration crisis have a social background. It is the prosperity of the richest EU countries that has been pulling millions of migrants to Europe for years. Their motivation is understandable. They seek better lives and they are aware of big differences in the quality of life between the richest and the poorest parts of the European Union. That is why the burden of migrants is so unevenly distributed across Europe, and that is why it is so difficult to achieve a more even distribution of migrants among the EU countries. The newcomers will spread evenly across Europe as soon as the prosperity is spread evenly across the EU. Obviously, they have more opportunities in the richer parts of the EU than they have in the poorer parts of the EU, whose most vulnerable inhabitants are often poorer than the incoming migrants themselves. So the answer lies in the economic and social convergence among the EU countries rather than in the attempts to distribute migrants by imposed quotas as if these people were unmovable objects that will stay where the Commission tells them to. Lastly, in recent years, we have been witnessing a steady erosion of social democratic parties in Europe. I do not speak about this because France and myself come from this political family, but I consider it a major crisis because of the key role the moderate left has been having in the liberal democracies. These systems cannot properly function if these democratic forces are replaced by radicals or by amorphous political movements as we witness nowadays. Perhaps we, Social Democrats, are today punished by voters because we forgot why we are here. Namely, to promote justice, to moderate inequalities, to protect the most vulnerable. If we want to convince our citizens that we deserve their trust, we have to convince them that our take on the reform of the Eurozone or on the migration policy is not led by abstract principles, but by the concrete concerns of social justice, of the moderation of inequalities, and of the protection of the most vulnerable members of our societies. I am speaking about crisis, and I am speaking about gloomy things, but I would like to finish that fundamentally I am proud of living in current Europe. I am convinced that it's big advantage and big chance to live in European cities, to have opportunity to utilize the European way of life. Yes, Europe is labyrinth, as Friedrich Nietzsche said and wrote in some of these books, but I'm convinced that this labyrinth, these differences, this multiplicity is part of our mentality and our fate, our destiny. I'm convinced that part of our life is also our ability to be on one side tolerant, also on one side to be able to reflect and to be critical. And I'm convinced that we are able to survive this year 2017. I'm convinced that we are able to manage all this election, and I'm convinced that after this election we have chance to be strengthened. And I'm also looking forward that after all this election, the new representation will be able to sit around the table and look for ways how to bridge, how to overcome divisions, how to solve differences between South and the West, between South and the North, between East and the West. And I'm convinced that we are able to find a way how to keep together all our family 27. Thank you.